the presentation is this one, Roxanne Fuentes from Roberta's house in Baltimore, Maryland. So I'm going to be setting up the tripod and setting up and join the live and enjoy what you see. It's here. We're part of this program here in Buffalo, New York, the Peace Conference on Gun Violence Prevention. Yesterday we had the event. I did the keynote address there yesterday, and today that's a schedule on Tuesday. On today, Friday. This is my bio from yesterday and other information from the program. Congratulatory message here from my family and friends. And so we're going to go live. So I'm going to How are you? I just said it's already moving. She moves and moves to the second life.
I've been pretty good. Yes, and I'm like, it reminded me of my.
That's the question I was going to ask you.
Okay, everyone, we're going to get started. Okay, we're going to get started. And we welcome Roberta's House to Buffalo, New York. We have some people. We have some people that has been to Baltimore just to go to Roberta's House, and they have been coming back saying, we have to bring Roberta's House to Buffalo. We have to bring Roberta's House to Buffalo. So we welcome Roberta's House from Baltimore, Maryland to Buffalo.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Y'all can do a little better than that. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. Give me a warm reception all the way from Baltimore. I tried your wings yesterday. Where? Anchors? No. See, I was asking. Where I gotta go? Where I gotta go? Is that where I'm going today?
Barbecue pit from the grill.
All right, well, before I leave, y'all let me know where I gotta go today. So, my name is Roxanne Fuentes, and I am one of the senior directors at Roberta's House. They say they just gave you a promotion. I think they just gave you more work. So I am the director over several programs, one of them being the Homicide Survivor Advocacy Project. I am also over Family and Youth Services. So Roberta's House does quite a bit. I'm going to show you a slide of all the stuff that we do, but the bigger emphasis today will be on homicide. So people ask me, why in the world would you want to work with homicide? I didn't. It just, I told a joke earlier that my grandmother used to tell all the time, and it's if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. Yeah, right. And so I'm a little girl from Spanish Harlem. It's Harlem, New York, via Puerto Rico. My family, both sides are from Puerto Rico. And I grew up in what I thought was a wonderful, amazing city until it wasn't. And so, they always say, I'm also a therapist by trade. And I tell my clients when I first meet them, my job isn't to give you answers, my job is to help you connect dots. And so when I heard someone say, I met with that therapist, and he started telling me more about himself, finding a good therapist is like shopping shoes. You may have to try a few pairs on before you get it right. Don't give up, okay? But during my childhood in the 80s, a tragedy happened. And it's not one I talk about all the time, but I'm gonna share. It was a big case in East Harlem. And unfortunately, one of my dear friends was one of the victims. So at a very young age, I learned about homicide. At that time, it was not taken seriously because there were little black and brown girls being raped and killed in East Harlem. And during that time was during the crack epidemic, and they didn't care about us. They didn't care about us. What was making the news is if it was a high profile case, a stockbroker got attacked in Central Park, that makes front page news. But a 13-year-old girl's body found in an abandoned building, stabbed to death, and raped doesn't. So I'm not gonna play the whole thing, this is a trigger warning. The content is not the friendliest, but it's important to the story. So bear with me.
Brings us to East Harlem native Aaron Key. Aaron was born on September 18, 1973. He claims to have been a music producer, but no evidence of this has ever surfaced. A cunning and charming individual who was also known to be a perv. He would peep through peepholes in ladies' apartments and was also known to try to catch videotape of upskirt shots with a camera. On January 24, 1991, Aaron, then only 17 years old, kidnapped, strangled, and stabbed a 13-year-old named Paola Hilera, whose family emigrated from Colombia. She was on her way home from school, entering her apartment building, got on the elevator, but never made it to her apartment. 3 hours later, a man walking his dog happened to notice a prone figure near a promenade near the East River. It was Paola's young body. The teenage girl was stabbed 3 times by the heart and dumped more than 10 blocks away from her building. It was horrible what happened to this young girl. She was found with a stick of chalk in her pocket, used to draw hopscotch boxes on the sidewalk. The rape and murder of a girl this young should have been a high-profile case and stir up a media frenzy. Unfortunately, due to the high crime rate in NYC at the time, this case barely got any recognition. A man's pubic hair was collected from her body and stored for evidence. Throughout the mid-90s, East Harlem was still a haven for non-consensual sex and murder for Black and Hispanic teenage girls. In 1994, a 15-year-old was assaulted at knife point, taken to a secluded area, stripped, and then sodomized. The 15-year-old survived the heinous act and lived to tell her tale. She described her attacker as a clean-cut young man with a well-built body. She also states that the man told her she should be grateful for this encounter and how she should consider herself lucky. This particular case went cold until 2004. On September 13, 1997, firefighters were called to a rooftop fire at the George Washington houses on East 104th Street. Firefighters thought they was putting out a fire on some rubbish or furniture until they noticed a bare breast and realized it was a woman burning, or what was left of her. Everybody in the area was horrified at the thought that someone living in this area could be capable of such atrocities. The female was identified as 19-year-old Johalis Castro, whose family emigrated from the Dominican Republic. She had been smothered in the basement, then burned while she was still breathing. Just like Paola, this crime went unnoticed, yet another dead teen in the neighborhood. 7 months later, in April 1998, another 13-year-old girl was sodomized in the same neighborhood. The young victim told police that she screamed in pain while her attacker taunted her, telling her to take it like a woman. 2 months later, on June 2nd, Rashida Washington was found robbed, sodomized, and strangled to death. She was found in the stairwell of an East 112th Street housing project. Covered in nothing but a shirt, she was propped up on a wall in a seated position. That fall, 2 more adolescent girls were blindfolded and sodomized in the area, a 15-year-old and a 14-year-old. They probably escaped alive because they both did not catch a good look at the attacker's face. As all these similar cases piled up, the families of the victims began to put pressure and blame on the police and the media for not covering these stories and not investigating them properly, blaming their ethnic diversity and low priority status given to low-income neighborhoods. Detectives began sending samples to be checked for DNA, something that, up to this point, was very costly and known as invasion of privacy. A breakthrough came in the fall of 1998 when DNA from Rashida Washington matched 2 other rape victims in the neighborhood. Police released a wanted poster with 3 different sketches and a hotline to call. A few days later, police received a tip that they should investigate a gentleman who goes by the name Ace. Police now also had established the name, Aaron Key. Aaron Key, now wanted and on the run, kidnapped a 16-year-old girlfriend of his named Angelique. He flew her out to Miami, Florida, sparking a manhunt across the entire East Coast. On the evening of February 19, 1999, Miami police stormed Aaron's hotel room. They rescued Angelique, and Aaron was extradited back to New York, where he was charged with the murders of Rashida Washington, the kidnapping and false imprisonment of Angelique, and 2 rapes from 1995 and 1996. Further DNA testing brought to light his involvement in the, by then, unsolved murders of Paola Hilera and Johalis Castro, as well as another rape from 1982. His trial started in 2000, to which he pled not guilty. During the trial, Aaron granted that he was being framed and that the DNA being used was fake, even though surviving victims identified him as their aggressor. On December 16, 2000, the jury found him guilty of all 3 murders and 3 rapes. When the verdict was read, Aaron yelled, "Fuck all of y'all." He was sentenced to 3 consecutive terms of life imprisonment.
but Paolo was a childhood friend of mine. And so growing up in New York City was hard enough during the crack epidemic. I remember as a kid on my way to school, walking across empty crack house. But you couldn't tell me that I wasn't living a good childhood. My family made it what it was. Little do I know that 20 years ahead, 20 plus years ahead, I would be running a homicide project. So you talk about connecting dots, you talk about God having a sense of humor. Later on, I realized that I never really dealt with the loss of my friend. And it didn't come up for me until much later when I became a mother myself. So I share that story with you because I want you to know that it impacts everyone. It doesn't matter what your background is, it doesn't matter how many letters you have behind your name, and I got a lot of letters behind my name. And it doesn't matter where you come from, it can affect anyone at any given time. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the project I work with. I like to make things fun and interactive a little bit, even though this content is heavy as I don't know what.
March, our mother and father provided funeral care for thousands of African Americans in Baltimore of little means. We recognize that the epidemic of
Oh, and suppose I have a audio visual.
March, our mother and father provided funeral. March, our mother and father provided funeral care.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead, we're gonna skip that part. All right, I want everyone to stand up. I don't need a mic, everybody stand up, everybody stand up. I wanna welcome you all to Roberta's house. You have been transported to Roberta's house, okay? And anytime we start a meeting or a group, we say the Roberta's house motto 3 times. And every time you say it, it gets a little louder. You ready? Yes. All right. I care for you. You care for me. We care for each other. One more. I care for you. You care for me. We care for each other. I care for you. You care for me. We care for each other. Thank you. Everybody can sit down. We start every meeting, every group, every activity, and we close with this one too, so we're gonna say it again. Okay? The premise behind this is that although Roberta's house is manned by clinicians, because I'm a clinician, we also believe in peer support. And so it's really about community. It's really about making people feel that they're not alone. So I heard some of the women on the panel talking about some family members judging, expecting you to kind of be over it by now. That happened 5 years ago, that happened 10 years ago. Are you still crying over that? What do you mean, right? And some, they don't mean harm, but they just don't get it. And so Roberta's house provides a safe, non-judgmental space for you to come and grieve. Because your grief is your own. And I know that Ms. Evans meant well by not allowing women to become too overwhelmed by telling their stories. But we actually encourage it. Because every single time you tell your story, you take a piece of your power back. Every single time. And understand that Roberta's house has created a space. I hope all of you get to come see our space. I'm gonna get it up there, I promise. It is a beautiful, state-of-the-art facility that the second you walk in there, it feels like somebody just gave you a hug. We just finished our rooftop, which is amazing, and we're gonna be having some events, so I really want you guys to come down. And let me tell you more about the work I do. I've created a model for our department that's called From Tragedy to Transformation, okay? HSAP, as we call it, Homicide Survivor Advocacy Program, is a program that is funded by the state of Maryland. We gotta fight every year for this grant, even though our numbers are what they are. And we specifically work with survivors of loss through homicide. We do this in a couple of different ways. Ooh, this audiovisual is upsetting me. It's not projecting. There we go. This young lady's actually one of ours. So these are going to be our objectives for today. Understand the emotional and social impact of homicide. Review current homicide statistics across major U.S. cities. Highlight the need for homicide survivor advocacy programs. Examine the story of Micah Conges. Showcase Roberta's House and HSAP. And hopefully inspire some collaborative solutions by inviting peace to come to Baltimore. So let's talk a little bit about the impact of homicide on families. Long-term trauma, post-traumatic stress disorder, and depression. Should have added anxiety on there as well. Homicide impacts the entire family, and it impacts both families. I just ran a group where I didn't even see it until the third session. I had a mother who had lost her son, 13-year-old son, to homicide by gunfire. And the mother of the perpetrator was in the same group. I didn't know. Until they started telling their stories, and I looked at my co-facilitator and I said, we got a problem. We got to pause this one. And usually we won't have the same persons in the same group because it's just too early. We have another group where we work on joining those families together, but not this one. This is the preliminary group and it's very raw. I believe the laws have only been 60 days. This is very raw. And they started talking, and the next thing you know, the woman's like, what's your son's name? And the next thing you know, your son killed my son. I mean, it was just, whew, a lot, right? A lot. And so we pulled the women out individually, we had conversations with them, and then we recommended to separate them into other groups. And the mother who lost her son said, absolutely not. I'm open to it if she's open to it. And they both stayed in the group, and we talked about how they both had an unreplaceable loss. The mother who obviously lost her son to death, and the other mother who lost her son to incarceration, but she also said she lost her son, period, whether or not her son goes to jail or not. And her healing process was completely different from what the surviving mother's healing process would be. Somehow or another, they made it through the 10 weeks of the session and became allies. And they're one of my most powerful speaking duo that I have right now. And it's amazing. I won't call them friends because they're not friends, but they're definitely allies. And the mother of the offender actually spoke on behalf of the mother who lost her son in court. And it was really based on her impact statement that turned the judge's view around on what this young man's fate should be. And he was a young man, he was young, he was under 17 and they were trying to move adult. And because of the relationship and partnership that they formed with each other, they were able to give this young man a sentence that wouldn't necessarily ruin the rest of his life. And that's an oddity, that's rare. That's rare. When I heard about the anger and I heard about, how are you back to yourself again? You're never back to yourself again. Your first self is gone. This event redefines who you are or who you become with it. So the work is real. You know, we do peer support groups because they're not, quote, clinical groups, because the facilitators are not required to be licensed clinicians, they're trained. But we do have clinical services on site. Because once the persons usually go through this group, they start realizing, you know what, I need a little more than just a group. I need some one-on-one, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. We do frequent screenings throughout the process to see, is their depression and anxiety getting better or is it getting worse? So we can gauge that. Community consequences. What does homicide do to the community? Anyone? What does homicide do to your communities?
Create fear.
Creates fear.
Great tension.
I'm sorry?
Tension.
Brings tension. We heard about the whole no snitching culture. It exists in Baltimore too. I think that's turning around a bit though. I do. I think in Baltimore at least, a lot of communities are so tired of losing their children that more people are more willing to be forthcoming and come out with information. The problem is that the city does not provide the resources needed to protect them. That's the bigger problem. There is no such thing as relocation. Unless the feds get involved, there's no money for that. They might put you up in a hotel for a couple of days, you gotta go right back to your house. Maybe, absolutely maybe. Oh, that's true, okay. That's twice. So heightened fear and mistrust, for sure. Reduced community engagement. Increased risk of retaliation and cycles of violence. I don't know how prevalent the gang culture is here in Buffalo.
Gigantic.
Is it? Okay. It's extremely prevalent in Baltimore, for sure. And I come from New York City. I've been in Baltimore now for over 20 years, but my entire life, mine's 20, because I'm only 25. New York City, and coming up, I did a lot of different jobs. I was an adrenaline junkie, and I was on the special task force for New York City. I responded to every major crime in New York City, including the first bombs in the Trade Center, the Valentine's Day Bronx massacre. I did all that kind of stuff. My family thought it was crazy. But gangs were very prevalent. At that time, it was the Latin Kings, then the Crips and the Bloods had kind of infiltrated. Baltimore is a whole different, there's Crips and Bloods, but they're not really the most prevalent gangs. But, so Buffalo has gangs. Very prevalent, okay. So think about a community that's still infiltrated by a gang and homicides happen. Who's coming out of their house and go tell the police who did it? So I want to talk about, get ready, trigger warning, this beautiful day. Michael Combs. Isn't he beautiful? We just got this case. So Micah was only 6 years old, and he was found murdered, fatally shot in the Baltimore home. This baby right here is his best friend. Roberta's house went into the schools, we do that, we go into the schools, and we conduct something that's called good grief workshops. And we stay in the schools for almost the entire school year. Let's talk a little bit about Micah. The home that Micah was found in wasn't his home. He was over 3 miles away from his home, 6 years old. How many of y'all have kids? Has there ever been a time in the ever world that you didn't know where your 6-year-old was? Mine is 23 and I still know where she is. We have listen to me, a 6-year-old found at 2:30 in the afternoon in a house that's known for transients, in and out this house, with a single gunshot wound. Gone. The gun was there. Then, the wonderful police that they are trying to convince us that the 6-year-old shot himself. I'm gonna tell you a little bit more about the case in a second, but I want to give you some background, some context, okay? His father was murdered 2 years earlier. So we were already familiar with the family, with the mother, okay? The mother had gone through our program two and a half years earlier, okay? Now the son is killed. The mother was never right after the first murder. Let's make this clear, okay? And poor Micah was kind of known to be a street kid. He just was. At 6. Yes, ma'am. At 6. There's a couple of theories going behind it. Now, this is the other kicker. We get referrals from the prosecutor's office. That's where the bulk of our referrals come from, and some word of mouth. And it doesn't matter when the homicide took place for us. It could have happened within the year, it could have happened 10 years ago. We take people where they are, right? I get the referral, I'm looking at the referral, and I called the detective, and I said, sir, I can't accept this referral. He says, why not? I said, there's no cause of death on the referral. It has to be a homicide. To come to this department, I need to know what the cause of death was. He says, the cause of death has not been established yet. So I said, so why the hell why you sending it to me? So I'm just like, oh, well. Because we have other programs. We're not going to turn them away, but I need to know where this poor family needs to go. Oh, it's just keep it in homicide. So there's a couple of theories going around about Micah's death. One theory is he shot himself. Anybody ever hold a 9mm handgun in your hand? I'm a licensed carrier. Anybody ever shot a 9mm handgun? Now, we in Baltimore, so I'm not going to tell you that a 6-year-old doesn't know how to handle a 9mm. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. Because there probably are some 6-year-olds that can. But I've worked in this field long enough to know that the easiest crime to rule out is a self-inflicted gunshot. There will be gunshot residue. Forensic's will come in and see the trajectory of the gunshot. It's not rocket science, it really isn't. But they haven't called it that. To this day, they haven't ruled it a homicide. Remember that, so we'll come back to that. Okay? All right. He has a brother. This was his personal statement. First, our dad was taken by gun violence, now my baby brother. What do y'all think is going to happen to that baby? Say it again.
He's gonna be going to carry.
He might probably carries already. How old do you think his brother is?
10.
He's about 10 years old. He's about 10 years old. Anyone else? What do you think is going to happen to that baby?
He probably think he's next.
Probably thinks he's next.
Probably want revenge.
Probably wants revenge and wants to retaliate and go find who killed his brother. Anyone else?
Might join the gang to help us.
Could join the gang. He kind of did. He joined the Roberta's house gang. We got it. We got Kamari. We had to. We got Kamari before we got the mother. The mother's a wreck. The mother was a wreck before Michael got killed. Young. When I tell you young, she's young. I was trying to do the math in my head. I said, whoo. That baby did not know how to be a mama. If she was a baby, having babies. That's for another discussion. So we got Kamari. And Kamari is now in our Raise a Hope program. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. He was a baby. And I put this in here because Micah is not just another statistic, and we're not going to let him just become a statistic. He was somebody's child. child of God. Now I'm talking about God in my presentations, but this movie. It was a baby. It was somebody's baby. These are just some pictures from the rally and that we had at the school. Look how young these people are. I want you to pay attention. This was their classmates. I think the bigger tragedy of this is that for a huge percentage of these children, it wasn't the first time that they've been affected by homicide or gun violence. That's the reality. So my babies are becoming desensitized to loss. They have no idea of human value, or the value of life. So now, we are creating a culture that is creating a future of young adults who are completely desensitized to violence. We talk about what kind of person has the capacity to live another life. Look at that line. Look at that line. The research shows us that a percentage of these kids will grow up and become adults and have the capacity to take another life. And not for any personal gain, but because of the experiences that they have had throughout their lifetime. I don't know what it's like here in Buffalo, but in Baltimore, in my private practice, when I have young men sitting in front of me, and they say to me, Miss Roxanne, I didn't think I'd be here. I didn't think I was going to live past 17. That's the reality.
They're living their life like video games.
They're living their lives like they're on borrowed time. Talk a little bit about the Baltimore homicide trends so you can get a perspective. When I was doing the data on here, and I saw what your numbers are here in Buffalo, I said, Lord, would I love those numbers in Baltimore. One is too many, but when you see these numbers, you'll see what I mean. In 2024, we had 201 homicides in the city of Baltimore. That's just Baltimore. We're not talking about the state of Maryland. It's just Baltimore, which is actually a decrease from the previous year of 23%. In 2023, we're over 300. And we have been over 300 consecutively for many years. Remember I talked a little bit about they hadn't declared Micah's death yet? We're going to get into it right here. Say with, not a conspiracy theorist, I promise. I'm going to sound like that, but I'm not. In April 2025, my to me going, it's slow, boss. You haven't gotten any referrals. And I looked at the data and I said, these are people only had 5 homicides reported. Now, my team is in the streets, so we know for a fact that that's not true. But look at the language. There were 5 homicides reported, meaning that 5 were declared homicides. If a death is not given a ruling and not declared a homicide, it does not become a Micah's death has still not, cause of death has still not been declared. And he was killed in May. So his number will not be counted in the month of May. It's politics for you. Keep that in mind, because they look at numbers. Now, don't get me wrong. There has been a significant push in the city of Baltimore to address homicides, without a question. I love Brandon. He is our mayor. Brandon Scott. He's doing the best that he can. But there is a bigger force than Brandon Scott, right? The money makers, the decision makers, and he go head to head with them all the time. He's kind of known as a little troublemaker, right? But I'm gonna date myself. He's kind of like the Mighty Mouse of Baltimore. For those of you who don't know. Okay, exactly. So he's out there in the community. He's not scared He's out there. But it's not just him that has to make changes. So the numbers, there has been a decrease. But that, ain't no way in the world you will convince me that, okay? No way. Community police collaboration is improving. I will say that. They're kind of going back to the days where New York City has started this. They used to do midnight basketball with the police. They used to really have police and community involvement, which definitely deterred the gangs, definitely deterred violence. Baltimore is starting to adopt that same practice. They're going back to what worked, right? Mayor Scott is reopening community centers, he's reinstated the police league that works with kids, the police athletic league, and all those kind of things. So collaboration is improving. The problem is, recruitment of new police officers is extremely difficult in Baltimore City because they're not paying anything. They're not paying anything, and then the recruits that they are getting are so young that they really need to be trained effectively. You get a 20-something-year-old, you're giving them a gun, you're giving them a walkie-talkie, and a taser. You're telling him, go, right? Then they gotta revamp it because a lot of the police aren't from the community, which is another problem. I don't know, I mean, I'm sure you guys saw the news back in the day about all the corrupt police in Baltimore and how they cleaned house, right? There's still residual effects from that. When you talk about identifying homicides, I'd like to know the true number back then, which was over 300, but we don't know what that number really was. Chicago, 573 homicides in 2024. Highest total homicides in the United States for the 13th straight year. Who won't go to Chicago? I like Chicago. I was just here for the House Music Festival. It was nice. No, living there though. Ongoing challenges in gun violence and gun violence laws and how easy it is to obtain a handgun. New York, my hometown, Fort Helps. 375 homicides in 2024, which is a drop from 2023. Talk to you guys that they are reinstituting early intervention and prevention. Y'all recognize that? I tried to get a decent picture.
That's good.
Okay. Y'all had 30 homicides in 2024 reported. A decrease from 60 in 2021. What's going on in 2021?
COVID.
Ah, got it.
Some parking lot parties. I was hired at Snug, which is where I work, in 2020, and so I got like kind of dropped in the fire. So the summer I remember because parking lot parties, people doing a lot of stuff on Facebook, seeing each other, and it was just like on site. So
Got it. Yep. Parties and all that kind of stuff was the contributing factor in that number. But they taking credit.
Yeah, of course.
We're not starting no trouble. I don't believe. Let's go. But there's still a disproportionate impact on you. Everybody know what that means? Yeah, they mean out of that 30, a huge percentage of that were you. So, all that leads up to why we need advocacy. So, you saw the numbers, right? In Baltimore. Guess how large my team is? Guess how many survivor advocates I that I have to split between Baltimore City and Prince George's County. Y'all are generous. Seven including. And in Prince George's County, we have a different need. Because a huge percentage of our survivors in Prince George's County are undocumented and are monolingual. So my advocates have to be able to speak Spanish. And a lot of times I have to work on it because I'm bilingual, right? And so you have that, and then the other problem with Prince George's County, or the uniqueness characteristic, is that most of those homicides are not happening in Prince George's County. These are immigrants who have had multiple homicide losses in their countries. And now they have migrated to the United States, but now they need help dealing with the trauma, the PTSD, the anxiety, the depression that they have experienced, because some of them, their entire families were wiped out. Okay, so keep that in mind. So for a city that big, in Baltimore, I had 3 advocates, 1 program manager, and me. And they manned the city. They do a great job. Great job, but as you can see, it's not.
So you're in both Baltimore and Puget County?
Yes, ma'am. And Roberta's House just won the statewide grant. So, we gotta have that. Survivors often feel isolated and unsupported. Does that sound familiar? Yes. Without intervention, trauma will fester. And I hate to keep pointing out my panel, but for you ladies who said you had not received any counseling, I had a chill up my back. Because I think I'm feeling, how are you processing this trauma? If they're not having anywhere to be able to put this or process it out, and I'm glad that you guys can make an organization like this. But without real intervention, the trauma just festers.
You know what? A lot of times when they go to their counselors wants to know the details of what happened.
Well, that's because you have unqualified counselors and clinicians. And you have to get a clinician who is certified and who is an expert in grief and loss.
Exactly, that's what I thought. You gotta find someone.
Absolutely, and that's hard. And sometimes you might have to do that remotely because the resources may not be in your immediate community to be able to find that.
I was gonna say, part of the problem is it's not, and then affordability of it.
That's, yeah.
And if there's not a way to.
But that's why we're gonna collaborate with each other, because all of the housing services are free. All of them are free, because we go after grants. We're gonna help you guys, we're gonna have to do that. So our program, yes, is something new. So let's talk about ASAP and what we provide. So we provide individual and group counseling, home visits, and emergency assistance. When I say my people are on the ground, they are on the ground. What we're finding though is the number of survivors who want us in their homes is very limited. They don't want to come to their houses. A lot of it has to do with the fact that 9 times out of 10, the crime committed happened right in their neighborhood, is what we're finding. They don't want us going in there with our big old Roberta house bags, or looking like we might be the police coming knocking on your door, not because of them, but because of their neighbors, right? And that's why we actively do more community events so that people know who we are. As long as we've been there, a lot of people still don't know what we do or who we are. So a lot of times, we'll meet them where they want to meet. They want to meet at Panera Bread. They want to go meet at McDonald's. They want to meet at Roberta's house. We're supposed to see our building. They always want to come to our building. We go get them, provide lifts for them to come, whatever it takes to get them there. The counseling that we provide are 2 different groups. One is just for adults. One is just for adults, and that is called HTP, Homicide Transformation Project, okay? That's just for adults. Raise of Hope is for the primary guardian and the children of the who are survivors. And that group is from kids ages 2 to 17. And we do breakouts that are age-appropriate workshops for kids. Each cycle is 10 weeks long. What we are finding is usually when the people make it to the 10 weeks, they don't leave us. So I had to create new curriculum to do, because some people go through the group again, depending on how raw and how new the loss is. I tell you, I have survivors who will sit in the group with their heads down through most of the other weeks. And they wake up about week 8. And then they come to me and say, I need to go through again, because I was there, but I wasn't there, right? And that's okay, we let them come through again. I have to tell you, the first time I did it at Roberta's house, I couldn't believe the transformation from session 1 to session 10. I couldn't believe the bonding that occurred. These ladies, most of the ladies will exchange numbers, they check on each other, they make sure that they're there to support each other. If it's an open case, they go to court with each other, and they have really created their own sub-community that they need. And most of them do have family, but the families that just don't get it. Until we're able to embrace the family members and get them to come in and experience what their family member has experienced. You know, I was sharing that I learned, and I'm a seasoned clinician. Don't let the cuteness fool you, that you are not to give a crime survivor tissue together. It's time to stop it. I stopped me in my tracks. I had no idea. I thought I was being nice. I was like, ooh. And I learned that from our president. And so we believe that everyone's grief is their own. And we do not have the right or the authority to rush anyone through their grief or tell them where they're supposed to be. So when a group member is yelling and screaming and telling me, Miss Roxanne, I just want to kill her. I sit down with them, I'm okay, how are you? What's that? I'm awesome. You really do? Hell yeah. I know my team thinks I'm crazy. But I've worked through it with them. I want to know where they are. I talk them down. Don't get me wrong, I'm not going to jail for nobody. But I do not discount what they're feeling in that moment. I can't even allow myself to even imagine what I would do if somebody took my dick. So who am I to tell you that you shouldn't feel that way? I get nervous right when she just goes out. She's 23. So who am I to tell you how to grieve your child? Who am I to tell you how to grieve your third child? I don't have that authority. But I can provide you a safe space. I can provide you a non-judgmental space for you to say whatever is on your mind. You want to cuss, you want to scream, you want to hit something, do it. We have something called expression room at Roberta's house. It's all padded walls. There's bats in there, there's boxing gloves in there. I have one, it's like I had a group, and I could feel the tension in the group. I said, all right, put your hands up, everybody up. And so I said, come on, 10 of us. Went into the expression, closed the door, and I said, scream. And they looked at me like I was crazy, so I started screaming. And they all, the screams that came out of these mothers. And then one mom, young girl, 25 years old, lost both her babies at the same time. And she fell to the floor, and the rest of those women embraced her and took care of her. That's what we need. I wish I was out of a job. I wish there was no need for the director of the homicide project. I even hate saying that. When people ask me, what you do? Well, I'm the director of the homicide project. What? We got little ones, 2 years old, all the way up to 17. And most of the time with their grandparents. Most of the time. Because a lot of these babies have lost their primary guardian. But Roxanne, what do you do with 2-year-olds? Ask me. Come on.
Roxanne, what do you do with 2-year-olds?
Sit on the floor, play with them. Let them color. Let them be babies. Give them a hug. I got one I fight with every week. He come look at me. He can't even say my name. Where is she? Where is she? My problem child. Okay. We do age-appropriate work, grief and loss work, and we meet the kids where they are. We have another issue though that compounds things. A lot of our babies have been placed in grade levels that they are not appropriate for. So I may have a 5th grader that's really on a 2nd grade level. And so I had to incorporate literacy programming into the curriculum. So I reached out to a soror of mine and said, I need you to create a literacy program. I need you to come and do literacy assessments for free. She said, free? I said, girl, you have that as your community service for the year. I ain't got no money. I need you to come and do it for free. And she has. And now I'm gonna write her into a grant and I'm gonna apply for it. I'm gonna get it. But that program, you talk about tear jerks. Let me ask you a question. Do you think a facilitator should cry in group?
Yeah.
Not supposed to.
Who said you're not supposed to?
Well, according to ethics, you're not supposed to.
Who's ethics?
Well, I'm a mental health counselor, but I'm talking about those ethics.
I need to be, I'm a licensed clinician.
Right.
The ethical violation is when you allow the group to become about you and not about your survival. But I'd be hard pressed to find anybody who is not emotionally moved by some of these stories. So sometimes I get a little misty-eyed, and they look at me and they you crying? Yeah. I can't cry. But you didn't know her. I didn't know her. I'm a human being and I have compassion. So those are the 2 main groups, and then you have the advocacy. What do my advocates do? My advocates do everything from planning the funeral, to helping write the obituaries, to fighting with the funeral directors who want to rip the family off. I got one who is a licensed beautician, and she has gone and done the hair of the loved one. I'm telling you, we do everything. We help with victim impact statements. We help them apply for compensation through the Crime Victims Board. We work with the Archdiocese and we get them food if needed. I gotta give a shout out to the Archdiocese of Baltimore because when I tell you all I do is call them, I got a family of 6, these are the kids. When I tell you the people show up with the parishioners, they get food, pampers, cribs, whatever it is that they need. And they do that for them 2 times a year. We do crisis fund, but of course, no surprise, the crisis fund pool gets lower and lower and lower each year. We go back for the grant. And crisis funds can be used for anything. You know, my lights are out. You know, kids need school uniforms. My husband was the primary breadwinner in the house, and he's gone. What am I supposed to do? So we get a lot of that. So I'm gonna toot our horns. We serve over 500 plus primary survivors served annually. 500. 50% are enrolled in extended programs. And a tangible reduction in re-traumatization. This is just a summary of what I just talked about Raise Hope. We try to provide service for the entire family. We also have a special program just for men, because men breathe differently. Oh God, I hope I can play this. I really want you guys to see this.
first saw The Ring, I remember being so pleasant.
Will somebody get the girl from audiovisual in the front for me, please, in the front desk? I really want you guys to see this one. I don't want to keep on talking, I want you to hear from one of our survivors. Any questions so far? Yes.
I'm not sure if you said it and I just didn't hear it, but who was Roberta or is Roberta?
I want you to see the video. And I'm gonna play the video while you're up here, because I don't want to cut it to your lunchtime, but there is a video on the history of Roberta's house. Roberta was a real woman, part of the March family, and the Marches have the largest funeral chain in Baltimore, and now they've expanded to Virginia. How long have you been around? Hold on a second. So I'm trying to get this letter.
Process has helped me tremendously. Working and talking amongst a group of men has given me different perspectives on
Yay! Give a round of applause. Give a round of applause.
things and thought processes. Just when you think that your loss is greater than someone else's, you understand more and more that it's just about loss and how it makes us feel as men and how we're able to express ourselves and to be able to talk and have the emotional literacy that's necessary to just communicate and keep things outward as well as opposed to inward.
To me, attending a game that's like really fun for me. It was a Thanksgiving feast. We bought things about our special person, like the person that we lost, and we would explain a happy memory with them or a great time with them or things that made us happy about them or something that they did or something that they were passionate about. And we will all be there to support each other. Dealing with my grief now, it's helped a great deal. A lot of the points that I could remember, even down to the journal that we made, it helped moving forward with dealing with the loss. It just helped me to focus and hone in on those good moments, those great moments, even though it was so traumatic going through that journey with my dad. It helped me to remember those moments that we laughed, those moments.
Other people who were there to talk about the death of their loved one as well.
How I'm doing with my grief journey now is, grief is grief. It's very tough. I can say that I am coping. I am expressing myself. No longer am I lying or masking my feelings. If you ask me how am I doing, I'm going to tell you how am I doing, because I feel like if you had the opportunity or you have the arena to ask me that question, then I owe you a truthful answer, not something that everyone wants to hear. You know, because a lot of times the standard answer is, how you doing? Oh, I'm doing good, I'm okay. And you're really not doing okay, and it's okay to express yourself and say that you're not.
I can understand grief. I understand grief so much now. I understand what it can do to my life. And I understand the type of person it can make me. And it's something that I'm so scared of going back to, but I know now that I have children again that I should not be scared, because I know that I always have people that are ready to support me and to guide me.
One thing that I would tell any young Black girl, your mental health is a safe space and grief is a safe space. Don't judge yourself for how you choose to grieve, and always open yourself up to change and growth, because even though it's hard, and you're gonna cry, you're gonna be upset. Who you were meant to be or who you are growing to be will thank you for those growing pains.
I was able to find that Roberta's House was a place that I could give back to someone else what I had experienced and let them to know you have the right to grieve. You have the right to cry. You have the right to miss your loved one. You have the right to take time and heal.
All right, I have one more, and then I'm done. I don't want to run over time, but I really want you guys to meet the founder of Roberta's House. So this is a new building. That's the old one here on the left, and that's the new one on the right. I'm not gonna go through all this, I'm trying to get to the video. So really, Roberta's House has become a teaching establishment where we are offering now, we have an education institution where we train folks like you on how to properly guide people through their grief. And as you can see, we do all age ranges. We have specific programs for children, we have specific programs for men, we do general grief and loss. We have a project called Project Hope, which is for children, for women who have lost children in utero and beyond. I'm now starting a new program for people who have lost pets, because for a lot, it impacts people quite significantly. I know nobody knows it, but my little guy knows. And this is just some of the theories that we implement. The 4 Tasks of Grief by William Warden. As I stated, we do have a behavioral health department that we have now been accredited to be an outpatient mental health center. And so that's going to be expanding as well. And we really wanted to do it because we want to have kind of one-stop shopping where we don't have to resource it out, and that we know that the behavioral health that they're receiving is specific to grief, and that their counselors and therapists have been properly trained. Youth services, which I am now in charge of. We do several camps. Camp Erin is a camp that we do every year where we take the kids out of the city and we take them to a beautiful campsite and they're there for the weekend. And we do specific grief activities. We do trail walks, we have swimming and zip lining, and we do a talent show. And it's just a time for them to be kids and to kind of reward them for the work that they've done all year long. We have a new program that's called Camp Phoenix that I just won a grant for that will be implemented in July, and that's a week long. These are some of our adult services that you saw in the video. Home visiting program. We have one of the largest volunteer arms in the state. We have over 680 trained volunteers. We have a rigorous volunteer training component that everyone has to go through if they want to volunteer, which includes criminal background checks, because we work with children. And about 80% of our volunteers have gone through our program due to a related loss. This is the continuing education program I talked about. That's our founder, Annette.
So, Roberta, do you mind if I ask you a quick question as you do this?
Yes.
And I want this to come out the right way, but when we do presentations like these, it's important for us to remember the role we play as with the information we share. And for me, as a criminologist and a social scientist, I wonder why you use the number of homicides in a city to compare them rather than the rate. I heard people said in Chicago to me that they would not want to live in Baltimore. You know why? Because the murder rate in 2024 in Baltimore was 35.7 people per 100,000. The murder rate in Chicago was 21 people per 100,000. You know why the murder rate in Baltimore was higher? Because although there were 202 murders as opposed to 573 in Chicago, the population of Baltimore is 565, right? That's 500,000, and then in Chicago you have 2.7 million people.
Right,
So I'm just saying that.
I'm not getting into a competition of who has more homicides per capita than the other.
No.
That was not the intention in the presentation. The intention in the presentation was to show you that you're not alone, that homicides are prevalent across the country. I could have came up with all 50 states to show the homicide rates. It wasn't about that. And as we know, the percentages are going to vary depending on the census and population of the cities that you were talking about. So it wasn't to discount the homicides that have happened here in Buffalo. One is too many for me. And so I did not want to approach this presentation as a scholarly presentation, which I could have, but it was really just to show how from different cities, you have Midwest, you have up north, you have down south, right? Homicide is homicide, and it's unacceptable. I don't care what the numbers say. And so, and the other part of it was also to show you, because I exposed Baltimore. I exposed Baltimore because they're delaying causes of death in order to have the numbers from Baltimore. You know, allegedly.
Yeah.
It's allegedly, I don't assume. Allegedly, right? But when you delay that and you're not honest about what has occurred, you also delay services to families that are in great need of it. Let me play this really quick so you guys can kind of get this. And
African Americans in Baltimore of little need. We recognize that the epidemic of unresolved grief contributed to increased violence and health disparities in our city. Many residents lose their jobs, their source of income, or become estranged from family members and their community, creating a perfect storm of loss, grief, anger, and resignation. Roberta's House transforms the ability of individuals and families to find new purpose, circles of support, manage stress, and learn healthy coping skills that improve their well-being. We have provided free grief support and counseling to over 10,000 survivors of homicide, suicide, overdose, and women who have lost their babies. Our educational programs have reached thousands in schools, workplaces, and faith communities. Roberta's House staff have trained over 800 volunteers. Our volunteers reflect the experiences of the communities we serve. In 2021, we opened the first-of-a-kind bereavement center in Baltimore. The new center is an anchor for the revitalization of a blighted neighborhood. Roberta's House is a leader and an innovator in public health interventions to impact unresolved grief.
any questions? No questions? Yes.
How do you get children involved?
How to get children involved. So there's a couple of different ways. When we find out of a case like Micah, for instance, we automatically know this was a school-age child, and we automatically reach out to the school that the child attended. Luckily, we were already in that school, and so the school was already familiar with us. Many of the other children are really referrals, where we may have family members calling us and they say, hey, I don't know what to do. You know, my grandson is isolating, angry. So we get a lot of self-referrals from the families. We get referrals from the prosecutor's office. We get referrals from schools, and a lot of walk-ins. Yes.
Also, your children need counsel, like in there when the incident happened, do they get more support from a counselor at the time?
It depends. So each child, every person that walks through the door is processed, as we like to call it. They're screened, they have a comprehensive admission screen that is completed. And then the person who is completing the admission screen determines appropriateness, right? Is this child appropriate for group? Is this child in need of one-on-one counseling in order to prepare them to go to group? Some of the children are ready, some of the adults aren't ready. And so once that is taken care of, and the recommendation is given, then they are placed in the appropriate service.
Some of them, you get a lot of calls like 5 days after the funeral about counseling. What do you say to them? What do you mean? When you put them into your counseling program?
Yeah, so this is timing is everything, right? So, if we are already in session and we are 3 groups into session, that group then becomes a closed group. Because the culture of the group has now been developed and they don't want to be outside of the group anymore. So what we created were drop-in groups that transpire in between sessions so that we don't lose that person. Or we may give that person an advocate, and the advocate goes ahead and goes to the home and meets with the family. We always find something to embrace that person so that we don't lose them. Yes.
Collab with other organizations.
Absolutely, absolutely. We are growing exponentially, and it's a little scary because we're going so fast. But we are now being a statewide service, which means that we will be covering 23 jurisdictions plus Baltimore City. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around that. But we will be providing a lot of online services where people will be able to do a drop-in group, a live drop-in group, and be able to participate. We are now developing packets to send to folks who enroll on how different degree we do incorporate a lot of art therapy in our groups for adults and children. So we are in process right now of working on that. We are also been awarded a grant from the city due to the opioid lawsuit that the city won. And we'll be providing specific services for survivors of people they lost due to overdose. So it's a lot going on. Yes.
You work with a lot of families in the communities. What does your self-care look like?
I got a good one for you. My boss kind of looked at me like I had 3 heads, but I am huge on self-care. So Roberta's House is probably the first agency that I have worked for who takes such good care of their team. We don't even call them staff, our teammates, our fans. So Roberta's House forces you to take a mental health day every quarter. We shut down between Christmas and New Year's at no cost to the team. They're paid for that. For my own team, I just took my entire team to a day at the spa, where we have massages and body wraps and all that good stuff. I'm a good writer, so I wrote it into the grant to justify why we need to take care of our folks. We also do chat and choose. We do a lot of stuff to promote good care to our team. The problem I have with our team is I have to force them to take time off. They call that they're sick, but they are their computers. You said you're sick. So we have to I said I was going to go to this, so I'll just go to recap. I know I'm out of time. So Miss Roberta March, who's no longer with us, was the mother of Annette March Greer. And her husband ran March Funeral Homes. March Funeral Homes are one of the largest funeral home chains in Baltimore, Maryland. And they used to hold impromptu, informal groups in the funeral home to help support families. And it was a dream that was manifested by Annette, her daughter, to open up a grief and loss center for families free of cost. And Annette, blood, sweat, and tears was able to pull that off. And so the building that you saw is a relatively new building, and it's on North Avenue across the street from the cemetery. Very ironic, right? Up the street from one of the March Funeral Homes. And so the dream is to expand that building. We're looking at some properties across the street so that we can continue to expand our services. But the marches are very prevalent in Baltimore and did a lot of services for free. Back in the day when it wasn't called therapy, they were actually doing that, providing grief and loss groups to families who needed it. Any other questions? Well, I thank you for your time, and if you're ever in Baltimore, come see us.
Thank you so very, very much. And we look forward to coming there to get trained and to coming back. Thank you. So now, before we have Senator John Ryan, who wanted to say a few words before we have lunch. Thank you for coming. I have to say this first, and it's not political. We invited sent letters to all the elected officials in the city assembly, and he's the only one that responded. That's why he's here.
Well, are we still morning?
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. So, could you folks just give a second to tell me what organizations you are from in the city of Buffalo? Help me figure out exactly who's here. Going to start at this table and let me know who you're with.
Okay, so we're with the Buffalo Urban League, Buffalo United Resiliency Center, and I am also an elected official, Kathy Evans Brown, board president of the school board.
It was the wrong context. Of course you are. Nice to see you today. How about the back table? Okay, great.
Rochester, New York, Morgan Williams Youth Advocate Program.
Excellent.
Black social workers.
Excellent.
Oh, I'm from MVP, Most Valuable Parents of Buffalo.
Yep.
And the table from Buffalo.
Smug?
Buffalo.
All right. Peace.
Urban Christian Ministries.
Okay, great.
Western New York, captured the New Grief Center.
Okay, great.
Peace.
Got a lot of peace in the valley today. Peace at the back table too? Well, thanks for all that, everyone does. I just wanted to talk a little bit about, how I think, criminal justice, policing, and public safety, comes together. So we, from New York, we've been funding the SNUG program and the GIVE program, for a good couple of years. And we fund these things through the Department of Criminal Justice Services, but, they're tough grants. And, we do really good grant compliance, but we think these programs work. For too long, we looked at any sort of crime problem as just a police problem. But that's not modern public safety, right? Modern public safety has a complete alignment amongst post-crime advocates, violence interrupter advocates, all different people in the community working together. And that's how we have driven down the shootings in the city of Buffalo. And you know, I agree the idea of how to measure is so difficult, right? So if you only measure killings, but not shootings, you're missing it. Because in Buffalo, a lot of shootings would be fatal, but we have a great trauma center. But that doesn't mean we have less gun violence because people aren't dying, they're being saved. So you might also know that I have other ambitions right now. I'm running for mayor of the city of Buffalo in addition to doing what I'm doing in the Senate. But we need to keep this complete alignment going. I thought the former police commissioner, Joseph Gramalia, did a really good job of working together with the community groups to work on the violence interruption. And, you know, I think that's so key. I recently went to a meeting with survivors of the Rwandan genocide. There's a lot of people from Rwanda in Buffalo, and you meet them on a day in and day out basis. Sometimes you forget that the only reason they were here is because, you know, they were victims of genocide and they had to flee their country. But when you get a bunch of Rwandan survivors together, it gets deep fast. And, you know, a Rwandan man told me that he started becoming active in the community in a different way. And he started talking about, you know, his view of violent crime. His view is when you take a life, you take your own life with it. You take the victim's family's life with it, and you take your family's life with it. You know, his idea was, you know, person A shooting person B didn't really capture it at all. You know, what happens after this crime takes place, that everyone involved in a big circle is irrevocably changed. And I just think it's so important that we keep an open mind to all the different programs that are happening across the state and across the country. So it's great to have people from Baltimore and Rochester here. There is no one answer, but I think we learn so much from each other, hearing, you know, the stories going back and forth. I just read about this program that they're doing in some cities called BAM, you know, Becoming a Man, and it's all about, you know, split-second decisions. That in America, the split-second decisions become deadly because we got a lot of guns in America. You know, in other countries, these split-second decisions might end up with a black eye. You know, but not in America. So, you know, we've really only had 5 major pieces of gun legislation in over 250 years. You know, we've done our part in New York State. We made it so it's hard, even in the face of what the Supreme Court has been doing. It's still difficult to obtain a handgun in New York State. You gotta wait. You gotta go through the waiting period. So we've limited the number of guns on the street compared to like places like Chicago, because they got tough laws in Chicago. But right next door in Indiana, you can buy a gun at a library card. So, you know, they just have an uninterrupted flow. And we know we have a flow of guns coming up from Virginia and Pennsylvania, but we've done a lot in New York to limit the number of guns in circulation. And it's super easy if you look at the nationwide, you know, murders and shootings per 100,000. You know, states like Alaska and Montana, even though they're low in population, you know, those are the states when you have just absolutely free access to any weapon you want. Shootings go up. And you see what's been happening in Texas and Florida, where they took away all the rules essentially about who can own a gun, what you have to go through, and their shootings have gone up. But so many of their shootings have been traffic incidents that used to be, you know, people shaking their fist at each other. Now people are shooting each other. So I'm a firm believer we're trying to get as many guns off the street as possible, because the tragedy is not a tragedy unless somebody has that instantaneous ability to pick up something that could end your life with hardly, you know, any effort or any thought. But I really appreciate the work that is being done with families post a victim of crime, post having someone murdered. I was just sharing a story. I was over at Elam a few weeks ago, and there was a Saturday activity, and a woman I know was sitting alone in the lobby, and I know what's going on. she saw I'm reflecting because my son would have been 30 today. And, you know, he was murdered 11 years ago. And, you know, the thought of someone dying young and unnatural is just so hard to deal with. But you compound that when that person's life was taken. And, you know, my heart broke for this woman. But, you know, 11 years later, it's the trauma and the pain is still there. So, you know, I believe in the work that the SNUG people do with the violence interruption. I think it works. The people in the community are much more willing to talk to people in this room, you know, than they are often, you know, police departments. I think getting that information out there, because it's really the tit for tat cycles is what we have to really combat. But I'll put it another way too, is that, you know, the other problems with this accessibility to guns is each year in America, year in and year out, there's equal numbers of people whose lives are taken, and then equal number of people who commit suicide. And they commit suicide because in a moment of desperation, they have access to guns. And we see the suicide rate amongst police officers, military veterans. You know, it's all so much higher than the rest of the population, but it's because they have access to lethality. They try to commit suicide with a gun, you know, the lethality rate is super high. You can't come back to it. So sometimes suicides are a plea for help, but if you have a gun in hand, there is no help can come. But I also appreciate the question about self-help for people who work in this field. Like, it is not easy carrying around other people's grief. And it's not easy carrying around other people's stories. I was a legal services lawyer for years, and I was mostly representing, you know, women who were facing eviction with their families. And I couldn't do the work anymore after a number of years because every night I went home to my wife and my children, and I knew that the case that I lost that day, you know, that woman had 72 hours to clean out her entire life, to move with her children, often to a homeless shelter. And for me, just day in and day out, carrying that around, it got too much for me. But at that time, no agencies thought about self-care. You know, no agency thought about, you know, what about the trauma for people who are, you know, involved with this work. So I think we've come a long way in that thinking. And so I was really happy to hear, you know, the self-care question, because you're dealing with other people's grief, and you know, it can't end up taking that grief yourself. But it's so easy to do when you hear story after story, you sit with grieving families, you know, year after year. So I really applaud, you know, the work, you know, that you're all doing, and I just have such a tremendous respect for that work, because it's a calling. Trying to get into this is, you're not doing it unless your heart is there, but keep doing the self-care, because we need you to stay healthy, you know, for your families, and for your community, and for your loved ones. So you gotta make sure you have it in the tank to help other people. You can't do that unless you're taking care of yourself. But I was glad I was able to come today. I wish I could stay longer, but I will continue to look at, you know, at community violence as a community program that has no easy answers. But I do know that if you only focus on law enforcement as the only answer, then you're not doing modern policing. So we have to make sure we have a fully aligned and a fully integrated police department working hand in hand with grief counselors, violence interrupters, and mental health providers. And we've seen so often situations escalate quickly when you call because your loved one is having mental health problems. And that we've seen case after case of how that can go off the rails so quickly. So I was happy to be part of a state grant, you know, that allowed mental health providers to go to people's houses when their loved ones are having problems. You know, off their medications, they're having episodes, to be able to make it so we can get that person into care. That's not a law enforcement problem. It could become one, but it's not a law enforcement problem. It's how do we get people to where they need to go so they can be taken care of. So we have a lot of work to do, but I appreciate the work. I appreciate and respect the work that you have done in the community on work that is not easy at all. So thanks so much for having me today, and I think I'm standing between you and your lunch, so that's never a safe place to be. If anyone has any questions or what New York State's doing, I'll stick around for a moment, or if anyone has a question now, maybe feel free to ask it.
I appreciate your appreciation for self-care, but in terms of legislation and in terms of funding opportunities and more help for those organizations, for those in the front line to get help by those who could help them, what is your organization and your group, what are your groups doing in that regard?
So mostly we've been focusing on the funding the programs. And then the self-care comes on the other side, is we want to make sure that there are, your insurance covers mental health coverage, and that your workplace is fully aware of their own staff's mental health needs to make sure that we access, what's available in the community. We have put a priority on that.
Thank
you.
All right, that's great. You guys do the BAM program there?
There are programs like that. I mean, there are other things to the BAM because there are some culture. It's very important to have culturally sensitive programs. 100%. So BAM is not as culturally sensitive as it should be to the people, to the majority of the population, but it has its own strengths.
Yep.
But SNUG is one of the programs. Violence interrupters. Theo Hardeman. I mean, that stuff grew out of Chicago. Right? So a lot of those works are going on there. There are organizations like Peace. Part of why I'm here is to try to bridge people that are doing like Roberta's House. The wonderful work has been done in Baltimore and other parts of the country and in the world. I do work in other parts of the world, and to be able to link with governmental, non-governmental, and private sectors.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And the doctor's point is so well taken, is that we have to set up the broad framework for these programs, but they need to be flexible enough so they're adapted locally, to fit the needs of everyone's individual communities. Even here in New York State, Newburgh and Buffalo aren't the same places. Everyone knows Brooklyn and Buffalo aren't the same places, but a place like Newburgh has its own set of difficulties. So we have to make it so folks that give in the SNUG are broad enough to be tailored to what we have in our own communities.
I was gonna say Newburgh has a SNUG site, but as far as self-care, as far as the SNUG program, social workers were added 5 years ago. One of the things that we do outside of operating as a victims assistance program is overall support for the broader work. So that is me, say the team has to respond to a homicide, that is me actually checking out to see if any of the team knows anyone involved. And basically, how do I say this, kind of being like a ninja and checking in on what is going on with them. We have a great team, but most times our teams are not safe enough spaces to like express the grief that they're experiencing doing this work. So a lot of our work as social workers at the site is keeping a beat on like the team's emotional, overall being. They also have access to the Calm app, and we partner with Vessels for like more one-on-one counseling. So they can set up an appointment with a counselor while they're working as they do. So that's some of the things we do for our workers.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic that the culture of the organizations are changing.
Yes.
To make sure that, just what you're saying, someone's got to be the ninja in that office.
Yeah, because we, the social workers are going to help them feel their feelings, and most people are not comfortable with that. So.
No, because we're care providers.
Yeah.
We want to take care of other people, and then we forget about ourselves.
Yeah, so it's definitely it is a strategy.
Yeah, I appreciate how your office is handling. But thanks again, everyone, for having me here today. Thanks for the important work that you do in our communities.
Well, we're live here, as you told, in Buffalo, New York. This is the second day of the peace conference here. Thanks for those of you who decided to join us. It's a conference entitled Gun Violence Prevention here at Buffalo State College. We are in the beautiful JVL Alumni and Visitors Center. It is a very beautiful building. If you guys are in Buffalo and you're looking for a place to have a conference, I really recommend the place. So we're about to break for lunch, and we will have Senator Sean Ryan, we just heard from him, and Roberta's House, Roxanne Fuentes just made her great presentation on this topic. After lunch, right here in this room, we're going from 1 to 2. Erica Friedman from Coburn and Mentors in New York will be right here in this room, and then we'll have question and answer for an hour, and that will be it for the end of the day. So thank you so many of you who have watched our live. We're watching it live, or we'll be watching it post. Hi to both of those of you who are saying hi, and we will catch up with you again. Thank you so much for watching. Okay, bye-bye.
Father, we thank you for this. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for your loving kindness and to the mercy.
I'm trying to send this. I guess I should be able to end this. Hey, sis.
Thanks for your work. A lot of hard work. Glad you're doing it.
I'm trying to end this thing. Can you guys imagine? Senator, thank you so much for.
Yeah, good to see you, Doctor. You out in Chicago?
Yes. You know, I was just talking to one of the things.
No.
We want to wish Shelley a happy birthday today.
Drag somebody else down. But others have to be good to say. Well, we're not that bad. Yeah. We all learn so much from one another. Well, that's good. So there's that article. I'll give you. There's an article last week from New York written by Melvin Gladwell. We all think criminal masterminds and violence, but it's usually
At events like these.
communication skills are more effective. People's perceptions are different, and because of the accessibility of guns, that ends up. He also thinks that people are trying to say everything. You're in there. Good. Okay. Yeah, let's send you a link.
All right. Hopefully when I just turn this off,